I didn't actually realise you were Australian.
Really?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I moved here. Wow, 10 years. Oh, well, I didn't move to Germany 10 years ago. I moved to London about 10 years ago, kind of on a whim, kind of on I had wanderlust, and it was a case of I just didn't know where like sort of career and life was heading. So my siblings, one had lived in Sweden for 6 months, and my sister and her husband had lived in the UK. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to be the sibling that doesn't do it. So on a 12-month visa, 10 years later, I'm still here.
Fantastic. That's what we like to hear.
Well, we won't tell the government.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of waiting here in Germany to see what happens with Brexit. But look, honestly, by the time they sort anything out, it's going to take so long based on how much paperwork is going to be involved. Could be 5-10 years.
Oh, that's, yeah. Like, I don't necessarily want to get too political about it, but I'm not really sure if many people have thought that through as to how much effort and manpower and all that's going to be involved in that. It's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading even just like to process all the EU residents or people living, I don't know if they're residents or not, living in the UK would take 47 years.
47 years?
Yeah, based on the current pacing and number of staff and all that sort of thing. So, there you go.
Well, worst case, we'll go back to Melbourne. It's not so bad.
Fair enough.
It's not too bad.
At least you get the same weather, right?
No.
Not at all.
No?
So you're not from Melbourne. You must be, I would say you're Sydney, maybe.
No.
Gold Coast.
No. Nah, even further north. Brisbane is my adopted hometown.
Yeah, right.
But I'm actually born. I was born in a place called Rockhampton.
Oh yeah, no.
Oh, people have heard of that. That's great.
Kate had a friend who lived in Townsville, and we went up Cairns and Townsville for Christmas a couple of years back.
What was it, 4 or 5 years ago now?
I suppose it was 4 years ago. Yeah.
Oh wow.
It was a strange trip.
Very strange.
Anyway, so we got to experience NBN though.
Yeah, the disaster that is. Other words I could use, but not in polite company.
If you want to have a laugh, I'd encourage you to read the New York Times this morning and their review of the NBN.
The New York Times?
Yeah. And it's just, they're basically saying, let this be a warning, because Australia's internet, even with the NBN, is still ranked 51st in the world. So it's below places like, parts of, most of Africa, most of Asia, most of China. It's unbelievable.
Oh.
Well, I just got back from Romania yesterday, and they made the internet themselves, which is quite amazing. So it's all above ground, but everyone just started sharing internet. And they ended up with a really fast network, and then companies bought it off the people, which was really
I didn't know you could do
cool.
that.
Yeah, no, because they got fed up with waiting for the government to do it, so they just did it themselves. Someone got it, and then someone shared it with someone else, and someone shared it with someone else, and then it just kept going.
Really?
And they have the cheapest, fastest internet in Europe.
That'd be a good story. Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy wow.
Didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah, no, but it's all above ground, which makes it, if it's windy or something, it can go up and down a lot.
Right.
That's the only problem, because it's not below ground. But it also means it's very easy to lay it on, because you have to dig up the roads.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What I don't really understand in so many ways is, sorry, when it first came out, or the idea was proposed, I thought this is a magnificent concept. Just like you familiar with the snowy river scheme?
Yeah.
Hydro, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the same concept, right? The government plows in an enormous amount of cash, but from that you can then build all sorts of things based on that investment. So you never recoup that core money, but you can make money off of what comes afterward. I always say it's like roads or whatever.
Yeah.
You pay indirectly for roads, but from that, you can get freight companies and Amazon and all the rest.
It's infrastructure.
Exactly. And so I thought, well, this would be great. And then comes all the political, the weird madness of the political crazy that is Australian politics right now. And then, we'll have it to your home. And then came out, skipping a long story, a friend of mine, some of them are big network people, and he sent this story. It was a critique of a letter written by the CEO of NBN Co. And he goes through, it's really long and painstaking to get through, but he goes through point by point by point. But one of the best things was at the start of the article, he says, nobody in Australia wants gigabit broadband anyway. And then at the end of the article, contradicts himself and says, we know they do, but we can do it later. So,
oh my God.
The long story short was, we know it's coming and we're going to spend a fortune on this now. And then in about 10 years from now, we're going to have to rip it up, spend a fortune again, and we'll still be behind because then they'll have moved on. And it's just, you can't help but shake your head and say, what?
It sounds like the airport in Berlin. By the time it's finished, it'll be out of date.
Oh, yeah. The amazing super duper airport.
Well, it was in 2012, yeah.
So they realised it wasn't up to fire codes.
Apparently, and I think we might go, apparently every Thursday they do tours, and you could just go and look at areas of airports you don't normally see because they're just doing tours whilst it's doing nothing. I think we might go.
Is this like how they're paying for the airport? We'll do tours.
Probably.
Apparently it costs $1 million a day, so unless the tour is like... no, the tour is only €10, so I don't think they're paying for it with that. Unless the entire population of Berlin goes every Thursday.
$1 million a day.
Apparently. And this is for a poor city. This isn't Bavaria, you know.
No, it's a quite poor city.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I might keep some of this conversation because it was kind of interesting. But let's before we confuse people even longer, maybe you should tell us who you are
and what you do.
Who you are and what you do. Yeah.
Wow. Here we go. Let's see if I can make long story short without having to say that. Okay. So my name is Matthew Setter. I'm, as said earlier, I'm originally from Australia, though I'm told I have lost a bit of the Australian accent. I am a mix of a software developer and a technical writer. I started doing software dev. It's a bit cliched. My dad had, unlike other kids, my dad had Apple computers. But, computer's a computer. Then there was a hiatus and I kind of found it again at university. And through where I learned, I think it was C++ and Java. Java was the in thing at the time to learn. But then as fate or happenstance would have it, in my first job, people asked for, or the boss came to me and he said, a client asked for a website with PHP and MySQL. Do you know what either of those two things are? Because none of the rest of us do. So I said, not really, but I'll have a go. And so that's sort of how my career got guided. So I spent the next, what was that? That would have been about 1999, which dates me a bit.
It's actually about the same time I started, so yeah.
Oh, really?
But I was doing Cold Fusion.
Ooh. That's still a thing, isn't it?
I don't think so, but...
and what's Cold Fusion?
Cold Fusion was a technology from Adobe, Macromedia in those days for dynamic websites. I think now Adobe has taken it into other places and kind of mostly got rid of it. But PHP is much more widespread. And actually, I mean, I can see from some of the people you follow on Twitter and also who you currently are mostly working for, being ownCloud, who are originally Berlin-based. I think they still are. There's been a bit of a split there, which we can talk about later. That's all PHP. There's a lot of PHP on your Twitter profile. So
there's quite a lot of it. I keep saying that I'm going to become a polyglot developer, but I kind of am, but not really. But yeah, to clarify that one, after I moved to the UK by happenstance, because I'd been pure development up to that stage using the typical PHP, Linux, MySQL, and then intermixed that with PostgreSQL and Oracle, a bit of Sybase and so forth. I was kind of feeling like I was doing code all the time. So I asked around, and there was this on the company I worked for, which was at the time called iBuildings. I think they're called Invika now. They said, we'll pay you, I think it was £200 for a well-written article on something, that you've done for a client recently, something you're interested in. It has to be tech. It has to be about sort of what we do. That kind of earlier days, I guess, of content marketing. And I thought, I was okay at English at school. Yeah, it's something that's related. Why not? so kind of it also sort of happened a bit by chance, and I got to know Cal Evans because he was, I think he was somehow involved in that, and he put me on to Beth Tucker-Long, who was then at PHP Architect magazine. And that's really how that sort of came along. She's like, oh, look, yeah, what you've suggested sounds really interesting. That'll fit in with what we're writing at the moment. And it's sort of one thing kind of led to another, and just writing seemed to be it. It was a nice release, really, because you kind of got to talk about what you've done, express yourself, and then through that began the kind of journey to where I am now as documentation lead at ownCloud. Because I think it was I have done writing for a company called Kinetics in Brisbane in Australia, CodeShip, a little bit for New Relic and various other places, and a lovely company called Screen, which are in Paris.
Yeah, we actually have, we're almost two sides of the same coin. I also do some work for Screen and CodeShip.
Okay.
And we actually do, I think we both do a lot of quite similar things, interestingly.
Tell me.
Yeah. Well, just in terms of some of the people we've worked for, it looks like we also have both had some SitePoint connections. I can see Bruno and Ophélie on your Twitter profile as well.
and I'll be shot for not putting SitePoint in there. So big plugs. Yes, SitePoint.
Well, I just released a book with them, and actually today, purely by chance, I'm wearing one of their T-shirts. So I guess I should do.
At the Weekly Squeak today, all happening.
Well, you used to write for them too, Kate.
I did. Yes, that was my very beginning foray into tech journalism, writing for SitePoint. Yeah. And bear in mind, I'm not a dev. I'm not an engineer in any way, shape, or form. I'm doing more your kind of your research, your commentary, your analysis kind of stuff. So apologies, I have a croaky voice today, everyone. I spent most of last night interviewing people about the cyber attacks, the ransomware attacks. So, lots of very excited security experts.
Well, actually, now here's a very nice jumping off point into ownCloud. So ownCloud, for anyone who doesn't know, takes principles of things like Google Drive, Google Docs, Dropbox, OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive, Box, all these sorts of services, the convenience of having a cloud where things are hosted, you can perform a multitude of tasks in them relating to sort of office type skills. But then as the data privacy and security aficionados say, one man's cloud is just someone else's, the cloud is just someone else's computer. That's what they say. And ownCloud was kind of, I think, probably the first project to take this idea, make it more private, but also make it more usable. I mean, anyone can make their own cloud, in inverted commas, if they wanted to, but actually making it more usable, an installer that most people can run. And I know there's lots of, especially in Europe, schools, businesses that run it. So yeah, tell us a bit more about your work there.
I think you just did.
No, I told them about the company, but I haven't told what you do. So,
tell us a bit more about it. It's okay. Yeah. I'll just fill in the gaps. Yep. That's okay. No, that came about because I got to know two of the people from there, Michael and Felix, when I worked at, or sort of turned up to a local co-working space. But I mean, this was 2 years ago, and I got approached by Michael and Felix, I think it'd be about 6 months ago, because owing to the split between ownCloud and NextCloud, and I apologize, I'll sort of keep a bit out of it, mainly because I don't really know that much about it. As opposed to being sort of like too politically correct or anything.
That's fine. We're not really,
I know people who work for both, so it's fine.
So plus, it's obviously it's not the topic of today's conversation. So, and they had there was a person who was doing the role previously, who was moving on. And so they said, would you be interested? And I thought, oh, yeah, it sounds like a natural extension of what I'd been doing. So that's how I came to be there. The role itself is what they tasked me with. We're saying we really want the docs to be seen as what it should be, which is like a first-class citizen, because they'll get a lot of support calls, and the people in support are wonderful, but they really felt that if people could help themselves more and more deeply, then when someone made a support call, they would get more value out of that. They'd only have to when they really needed it. So you could the whole package, the whole company could come across as that much more professional. So in part, I'm taking the docs and just looking at them and saying, okay, what have you tried to say here? And I mean it as no negative reflection, but I believe I'm the only person with English as a mother tongue.
Yeah, sure.
So I sincerely mean that. No negative reflection.
No. We don't take it that way at all. We're in a similar position living in Germany as expats as well.
Mm-hmm. So it's saying, okay, look, I see what you've tried to say, but it's not quite come across that way. So how about tell me what you're thinking and I'll rework it a bit. It's also, sometimes devs being devs, I don't really want to write it because I just don't want to. I'd rather code, or I'd feel less comfortable putting my words out there. So how about I'll talk to you and you write it for me, because you're the writing guru. You just make it sound awesome, and I'll just tell you, right? So there's a bit of that. Plus, there's time as well. You've got deadlines because the 10.0 release came out just recently, and I think on the 23rd of this month is a larger sort of collective release. So, there's deadlines to meet there. But it's also working with marketing. So it's marketing and devs. And then also looking at the structure of the docs to say, how can you make it the most intuitive and easy to follow and navigate structure?
Yeah, I think you've touched on a really nice point, a really interesting point. I mean, I talk to lots of startups, doing interviews and so on. And one thing that really strikes me is that particularly your early stage companies, there's very much a feeling of we have to be able to be doing everything and doing everything well. When I often say to people, like, your skill is not to be, and maybe a CEO is slightly different, but your skill in the early stages is not to be, the best copywriter in the world, or the best social media manager, or maybe the best pitcher at pitching competitions. Maybe it's about utilising your skills on what you do and getting someone else to be able to do some of those other things that complement your skills. And I think it's, I don't know, I'm not sure if you would see this in other industries so much. Like if I was to embark on, say, a small business, maybe something in, I don't know, retail or shipping or whatever, that I would, that one would feel the propensity to have to be able to, be accurate and effective and skilled across all these verticals, when so much of it is building upon years of knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's a funny thing. I think more perhaps in recent times, there's this idea that you just have to be amazing. And I think it plays into that, what was the book? It'll come to me later.
One of those, is it one of those kind of lean agile kind of books?
No. It was, 2 secs, hang on.
Yeah, that's cool.
No, it's not on the shelf. There was a book, and it spoke of this idea of, it's on the tip of my tongue. But one of them, they said there was the different personalities that typically go into a business, and one of them was the technician. This idea that I have to do it all, and I have to do it all myself, and it has to be amazing. And it typically plays into someone who is, say, like the math geek, the tech whiz, that kind of thing, that very clinical, quantitative mindset. And it takes sometimes, and I agree with what you've said, it seems to take a while at times to let go and to realize I don't have to do everything. If I do a certain few things well, then that'll be enough. But there's all this kind of, I guess, everywhere you read, especially online, there's this whole, you have to be amazing at every single piece, and every piece has to align beautifully. And if that doesn't happen, it'll all fall down.
Yeah, and things like documentation and writing, it's also like, we have to be able to write these stellar Medium posts about your experiences and be able to articulate them and document, your story as you unfold as a company. When, maybe you are not the person who should be doing that. Maybe it's about getting someone else while you focus on building the company.
Exactly. You focus on doing what you do and do it really well. I think the story that I've read of, I think it was Atlassian, was a good one. They seem to really focus on, at that end, JetBrains comes to mind. From what I know of both, it was, no, we're going to focus on what we do and let the quality of the product itself speak for us. And then developers can say, you have to use this. It's really amazing. And then later on, I think in recent times, because a friend of mine, Gary Hocken, has been working at JetBrains for a while in the promoting PHP Storm. But this is only in recent times have they, I guess, put more effort and focus into sort of specific marketing as opposed to letting it be word of mouth.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I think they have a much better community than Atlassian. I did a couple of videos for them, but also they appear at more conferences. They sponsor more conferences. You don't ever really see Atlassian sponsoring conferences. I don't think I've ever seen them sponsor a conference apart from their own. It's weird. Even though they're both commercial, mostly closed source tools, for some reason JetBrains has cultivated this feeling of community, even though you can't actually really get involved with anything, but you feel like, I don't know, it's interesting. And I think they're a lot bigger than they sometimes come across, because I know they have at least half a dozen offices around Europe. And often they don't feel like they're very big, but actually I think they are, because you see how many people use them, Are you saying that they're able to perpetuate the idea, I don't mean deceitfully, but in terms of being able to create a community that's networked, connected? I think one of the things they do, so instead of making the tools open to the community, they open the tools to the community, which might be a roundabout way of saying things. But for example, for PHP Storm, they added a lot of support for lots of the major kind of open source frameworks. They donate licenses to open source projects. Right. When I worked at Cate, which was an open source company, VC funded, I said, can I have 10 licenses for the core developers? And they just said, yep. Because it was an open source project, there was no questions, no days of paperwork. They were quite happy just to give out IntelliJ licenses to an open source project and no questions asked.
Sorry.
That kind of side of things they're quite good at.
Yeah, I guess I'm hesitant to go overboard, only because I don't know Atlassian that well, superficially, but just the experience with JetBrains and stuff has always generally been, except for one particular bug, it's been really good. It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's awesome. And then the next release comes out and you'll have, say for example, when Docker had gained more than enough traction, okay, we'll integrate Docker. And then there was Vagrant before that. And then there are all sorts of plugins for this, that, and the other. And it seemed to always be, okay, yes, we've got developers, but developers who actually use our stuff, as opposed to a developer who, what do you think we should create? But you don't actually use it. So it seems to be they have a nice balance. And I guess, just speculating, by going to conferences, you talk to people and get real feedback and say, well, tell me what your problem is and how could we fix it? I guess.
Okay. Let's, just... After browsing through your profile, I also noticed you you have or do quite a lot with the Zend framework. Maybe just explain to anyone who hasn't heard of Zend what Zend is and how you got involved with it.
Wow. Okay. So let's see how I can do this. Zend. To clarify sometimes misunderstandings or conflated understandings, the Zend, the company, and Zend was acquired by RogueWave, I think late last year, which I don't know much about, but they're a much larger company, which is more a collection of various companies across various languages. But sticking to Zend, they were started by two of the earlier core developers around PHP. I think it was Andy and Zeev, they did a lot of reworking of their original PHP engine after it had been around for a bit. So they started a company based out of Israel and made a whole lot of products to sort of support and build on the PHP ecosystem. Zen, from where I sit, or what I should say is I work on or promote Zen Framework. Mm-hmm. And that was a framework similar to, say, Symfony, Cake, Laravel, all those larger PHP frameworks. I got into it mainly by happenstance. I think I had come from back in the day when I was the younger developer, the thing to do was to write your own framework. Cliched, yes, I did it, and learned the lesson as to why it can be good and why maybe you should just ask yourself what you want to do. Like, do you want to write the framework or do you want to actually write an application? I was more on the latter. Like, I wanted, someone would say, we want an application that does this. So I didn't want to be constantly with every project, either building my own libraries necessarily or recreating forms and helpers and all that sort of stuff. So I just went hunting for something, and I think Zen Framework won. I think there was Cake and a few others. I did some assessment, and I thought in my own mind that, well, Zen Framework seemed to be put together well. It seemed to have a company behind it. So community-wise, I figured it would continue, whereas others might lose interest and fade away, like Kahana. Nothing wrong with Kahana, but anyway, that was just one that came to mind. So that's sort of how it began. And in the first version of Zen Framework, quite similar to Symfony 1, it was good, but it had some shortcomings. Version 2, it got a lot better, and in that you sort of got more modular approach. So you could write modules that you could share around applications would have been the biggest change, at least for me. But it was around sort of like the Zen Framework 1 period that I started to blog, because I thought I just wanted to write stuff for myself. And, all my friends had a blog talking about what they were doing at their day job, so I thought I'll do that too. And it started off as a mishmash of things, which the thing that seemed to get the most traction through analytics was Zen Framework, and I was doing more and more of it, so I thought, why not take it from a general blog into a Zen Framework specific blog? And then that just sort of continued to grow, and I spent more time with it. And so I changed my original blog into what I have today, which is called Master Zen Framework. And that's masterzenframework.com.
Sure.
And it was around about late in the Zen Framework 2 period that I was sort of thinking, well, maybe do I start switching from PHP to Go? Do I spend more time with maybe Ruby, or Haskell and Scalar and various other languages? And so the blog sort of started to fade for a bit. But just recently with the new, effectively say Zen Framework 3, but it's in effect it's the third iteration, but it's called Zen Expressive, which is I guess a middleware / micro framework based approach to application development. And it was around that I thought, actually, no, I think I'm still interested enough and I'm still keen enough to continue. So I appreciate there's a series of interrelated bits there. But it really was through getting into Zen Framework and getting to know a number of the people behind it, such as the project lead, Matthew Wera-Finney, Gary Hocken, who I mentioned before, and various other people and spending such a lot of time blogging and interacting with the community that it got me my first opportunity really to speak at conferences. So I guess that's where I sort of continued to say, "Oh, hi, I'm the person behind this blog and stuff."
Yeah. Just out of interest, I mean, when I was a proper developer in very big quote marks,
okay,
I spent most of my time, and I haven't really done it for a few years now, also working in PHP. I started with pure PHP and then Cake, actually, and then transitioned strangely into Drupal and also contributing a lot to something called CiviCRM, which was a monolithic, large application for non-profits and stuff. I don't know. It was written in, God knows what it was written in, some sort of PHP. But there's always been a criticism or a comment, observation of the PHP community that the core PHP community can sometimes be a little unwelcoming. But the frameworks around it, especially WordPress, if it's not really a framework, but a common application built on PHP, Laravel, Symfony, Zend, Drupal, like they could be very friendly communities. And it's always been kind of interesting that the core PHP community is traditionally not very friendly, but a lot of the things around it are. I mean, have you ever experienced that?
Yes and no. My own take on it. Just recently, I had a chat to one of the newer contributors to Core, Sammy Powers, and Sammy said he'd heard that, but his experience actually was quite the opposite. Now, to qualify that, there can be. And there has been a lot of stuff around the standardization group, the PHP Fig, that there's a lot of sort of bad blood at times, and conversations can get very heated and quite nasty. From what I've seen, I agree that I can't give a conclusive answer on that. I'd have to say I have to give a qualified answer, mainly for two reasons. I realize this sounds like I'm so sitting on the fence.
Oh, it's fine. That's a perfectly valid answer.
but I can sum it up this way. I do some work at Rove, and we had a conversation one time without wanting to give anything away. But in the group, there's some people from Europe, there's some people from the States, there's the resident Australian, and so forth, and people from various other countries. And people, and some part of the conversation seemed like someone made this comment, and you're like, what the? And some people got quite kind of taken aback by it a bit, like, what do you mean by that? Like, how could you have said that? But knowing each of the people well enough, and knowing the person who said what he did, you're like, no, you could see how someone could take it negatively. You could see where they're coming from, but you can see why he's looking and saying, why are you getting worked up about what I said? I didn't say anything. So I think anyway, that's a bad example. What I mean is that I think culture and backgrounds can make things problematic when you have developers from so many different countries and backgrounds and time zones. Definitely. Someone can say something and mean nothing at all by it. But someone else can look at it and say, I can't believe you said that. Absolutely. That's so offensive. That's so rude. Yeah. But then the person who said it said, I'm completely lost as to what you're talking about. Yeah. And then it takes a willingness by everybody involved to stop for a second and actually work through it, and to, one, be honest, and two, genuinely work through it. Yeah. So I think, from my outsider's perspective, I think that plays into it quite a lot.
Do you sometimes wonder if also because it's an older community and is a bit more kind of set in particular ways maybe as well?
Yeah, I reckon that might be. I think you'd have certain people who've done things in a certain way for long enough, 15, 20 odd years. I've done it this way, why should I change it, I guess. Then you've got other people who, they come in later in the piece, they're younger, or they come to programming later. So they've had different experiences and they see life in a different way and say, well, why don't we do this? And then if you then have somebody who says, no, don't agree, who may not actually say why they disagree, you can see how exchanges might get heated and why people might not appreciate each other. But on the point of the communities, that's a funny one, how you can have the split. But what I observed was that a lot of people in some of these communities, they might not step out of the community. They might have come into programming. Say WordPress is an awesome example. They were never really a programmer. They were kind of like maybe a hobbyist coder, not to be kind of condescending. No. And, but all they've done is they've written the post, they've organized the taxonomy and stuff. And then someone said, and they've hit a point in what they were asked to do and what they knew. And so they had to learn some element of coding. So they started to learn a bit, but really what they learned was WordPress. And I guess the same for Drupal and some of the tools as opposed to the frameworks. And so they really didn't consider themselves a PHP programmer or maybe a a programmer overall, and maybe someone who, to a different degree, who used one of the frameworks.
Yeah, this is actually. I will say, I think this is kind of the when I sort of left the Drupal community, this was kind of the clash that was coming. Drupal 8 became infinitely more complicated, and a lot of the people who had just kind of used Drupal for ages with its various idiosyncrasies suddenly were like, oh, we have to learn how to do things properly.
Yep. And there is a lot of that.
Yeah, it's
because it was particularly, or it seemed to be the perception anyway within Laravel. I mean, I guess this is low hanging fruit, shooting ducks in a barrel, but there seemed to be concern around with some of us who weren't necessarily a part of Laravel that it had gained so much momentum and so much popularity and traction that the same thing would happen again, but to a much larger extent, that you would do Laravel, but you wouldn't necessarily know anything outside of that, or that actually Laravel was built on PHP and so forth. And so you could easily basically start and stay within the silo and never see anything else. And that was a big theme at PHP World, the conference in Washington. Their attempt was to say, okay, even if you've never done that, firstly, one, there's a world outside of what you do, and we all are friendly, and come on, let's chat, let's look at what we're all doing and try and sort of cross-pollinate and help each other grow a wider understanding. And I think, I don't know, this might be sort of shooting myself, but I feel at times, not always, when sometimes coming from a computer science background, I think it plays into a certain kind of personality, a certain kind of person who will follow that path, and they may be a little bit more withdrawn, a little bit less, not like most coders I know are very social, especially with beer or whiskey.
But maybe they communicate differently as well.
Yeah, and there's a different, it seems to be that there's subtle but sometimes distinct differences in personalities, whereas someone who's sort of come just using a tool maybe was more of an extrovert.
And more focused on accomplishing an outcome as opposed to just coding for the hell of it, I think.
And why don't you understand this algorithm? It's a beautiful algorithm. Where someone's like, look, I've been tasked with doing this role to achieve this deadline. That's what I'm doing. So, perhaps it's the personality, it's the background, and a variety of factors. But I definitely have seen debates that I've read on the PHP internals and stuff, and it's just, I could see how you could really get your nose out of joint about that statement.
All right. Okay, so I think in a kind of final wrap-up of this conversation, let's come back full circle. Well, not completely full circle because we talked about the MBN to begin with, but let's semi-full circle. So you've sort of hit upon there a little bit around communication. And all of us sat around this multiple tables. We work in technical communication of various aspects of, and I have my own kind of opinions. But what would, if someone was to say, I'd like to, or you'd like to tell someone how to explain themselves better, or you'd like to help someone explain themselves better, what would be your kind of top 3 to 5 tips of how to explain technical concepts better?
Good question. I guess my first thought would be not getting yourself too excited, in that you sort of have a sense of guided enthusiasm. You would ideally look at, if you had, say, a concept such as Laravel, metaphor, really, is try and understand who the person is or the people are who you're talking to, firstly. And talk in a way that they would understand. To paraphrase someone, it's not the job of the listener or the reader to understand what the writer or the author had in mind. It's the job of the speaker to convey themselves properly such that the listener can understand and fill in some blanks, but the core concepts are delivered. So, who are you talking to? So if it's a conference or whatnot, what kind of conference is this? Where are these people from? So how can I say what I need to say such that they'll understand it best. And then, despite my meanderings from this conversation so far, the points that I picked up at Toastmasters is, like, how long do you have to convey your point? So don't try to fill up every single nook and cranny. Less is more. How can I maybe pick one or two or three points? And then if I still have the opportunity then to maybe expand on those points later. So, what's the kernel of what I want to say? What's the core bits? So if someone didn't know anything and I told them one or two things to get them started, what would those one or two things be? And then after that, if you have the opportunity, come back to other things, expand on, pick up other points. So that'd be my first 2 points.
Okay, I think we're in largely in agreement.
Okay,
which is possibly why our mutual contact who put us in touch. Although I think we've floated around in touch in the past anyway, is possibly why he did, because I think he saw one of my posts and was like, "You guys should talk." Which is,
and actually
I'm having a complete blank of a second. I'm having a complete blank on his name, so I won't embarrass myself by trying to remember it.
It'll be in the notes.
It was, yeah.
in the podcast notes.
Someone from Melbourne.
So people can access them.
Iranian guy who lives in Melbourne, who's Alexa, that's it, Alexa. I'm not sure if you've ever met him, but he obviously knows you somehow. But he hangs around PHP communities, so it's probably just come across and he said, you should get in touch. And then purely coincidentally, I think you got in touch with you separately anyway.
Yeah, it was crazy how that happened. Actually, one last point while I think of it. And the other thing I think is dead set enthusiasm, but guided enthusiasm. Because I was talking to Dan Allen, and Dan was in super duper and like infectiously enthusiastic. But it's sharing with people, in a guided way. Why should I be interested? Because, you have a really busy life. You've, like myself, with 2 kids, married with 2 kids, and all the things you have to do. And someone's saying, okay, I should learn something new. Why should I? Basically sort of fill me with a sense of reasons and joy and interest as to why I should care. Why should I either drop something else to put this in, or find some time somewhere in there? So, yeah, that would be my third thing. The way you were just speaking then, that real enthusiasm clarified it for me.
Cool. Okay. Final quick and easy question then would be, have you got anything to plug?
I most certainly do.
Excellent.
Yes,
That's
I
what
do.
we'd like to hear.
Why is it I feel most relaxed right at the end?
Oh, no, we're the same.
It's that thing you sort of, sorry, as I'm quickly plugging in, I am not just hammering around. Good, browser's working. You just need a little while to get into a groove.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, I do. I'm writing, in the middle of writing a book and a video course for Zend Expressive. It's called Zend Expressive Essentials. You can find it at masterzendframework.com/Zend-expressive-essentials. I don't know if hyphens are a good thing when you're trying to give a URL.
Yeah, we have challenges with names and stuff as well when we're talking addresses and Twitter accounts and all that sort of things.
Well, yours is especially complicated, Kate.
Yeah, it's a hard one. But the long and short of it, I guess, is that we're very happy to link to those resources you've just mentioned on our podcast page, and we will share the broadcast with you, so you can share it with your own networks.
And this is the book and the course; they're both part of the same thing.
Yep. Like at this stage, it is. I only have a landing page up.
That's okay.
But it gives a broad intro as to what you can expect, and then about 7 or 8 of the key points. So you, I guess, get more of a media idea of what the book and the course will show. There's a huge form where you can put your name and your email address, so then I can know if someone's interested. And then the reason for that is that as the book progresses, I can then sort of say, we're up to here by now, and here's a sample video, and
just some pre-orders.
And hopefully keep some momentum building, and people saying, I don't know why you're talking about that, but talk about this instead. So kind of like,
sure.
community,
it makes perfect
interactive.
sense. Yeah.
Okay. And so it's just all the aim of it is just to give people the fundamentals, not the whole kitchen sink approach. Yeah.
And as far as I can see, you have Matthew Setter, SETTER.com, and on Twitter at SetterMJD. Yep, they're the best.
That's me. That's the ones. I tweet madly, usually every day, except for Sundays.
I think we're, again, pretty similar. That's why I wasn't surprised to discover that you were actually Australian, because you do tweet a lot for a German. So. Almost too much. But we're all similar in that vein, so that's fine.
Yeah, it's always funny when you go to a conference in Germany and they're like, here's the Twitter handle, and you realise that the only people tweeting are the English and the Australians.
And the organisers.
Oh, yeah, the organisers. No one else uses Twitter in that context, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time and joining us on a Saturday. And
thank you very much for having me.
Oh, pleasure. And I hope the rest of your day goes well.
Likewise. And thank you very much for wanting to interview this quiet little Aussie down here in Bavaria.